Did we lose Kim completely?
Oh dear. I think we did.
The Bigfoot throughout. Am I back?
You're back. Yeah. It just fast forwarded through the past minute of you in a very comical fashion.
I'm going to have to listen to this episode just so I know what you guys talked about.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a PhD student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Kim Plomp. I'm a bioarchaeologist. I study human evolution and health and disease.
And I'm Ross Barnett, paleogeneticist, mostly working on cats.
And today we're reviewing Harry and the Hendersons from 1987.
One of my all-time favorite movies from childhood.
Do you want to summarize this one then?
Sure. It's a pretty typical Bigfoot plot line. This family, the dad of it, George, is the dad from Third Rock from the Sun and also the creepy serial killer from Dexter. And it's like a typical 80s family, him and his blonde wife and teenage daughter and younger son driving a station wagon through the Pacific Northwest up by Seattle. And they hit a large hairy animal and they think it's dead, and they bring it home and it's in their garage. And then George goes and checks on it later, and he finds it missing. So this is a bit Encino Man-ish too, right? And then he goes and he finds them in the kitchen. And then, so at first they're afraid of Bigfoot, and then the Bigfoot's afraid of them. And then they, through elements of humor and nice 80s movie-ish, they figure out that he's actually quite kind and sweet and smart. And then there's always got to be a bad guy. So there's this Bigfoot hunter, and his name is LaFleur, is it?
Jacques
LaFleur, which sounded very like a bad explorer, like a villain, explorer and villain name. Like, is that the same one from the movie with Susan? What was his name? The bad guy? No, you don't remember?
Which movie?
With Susan?
Missing Link.
Yeah.
Oh, the French are always bad guys, though. I mean, that's just their role in film.
I just thought it sounded like you could see that being somebody's name that, was on exploring some continent or whatever. Anyway, so he wants to hunt Harry, and so George needs to get rid of him. So he does like the Big Yeller type thing where he tries to make him leave. And then it all, comes down to LaFleur's trying to kill him and George and his family trying to save him. And then it ends happily ever after. Did I miss anything? I feel like I missed a lot.
That's the main kind of outline, but you missed the kind of the subtext of the family starting out as big hunters and being very kind of gun central and pro violence, and Harry kind of changes them, which I really liked as a kind of subtext.
And then there's the whole idea of everybody thinking Bigfoot is a big scary beast, right, and trying to be portrayed as a big scary beast.
Yeah,
and he's not. Yes,
he's a kind of he's a forest spirit, essentially. He's the embodiment of Mother Nature and our kind of caring and sharing side that modern people have overlooked and ignored, and he kind of brings out in them. I love this film. I loved it as a kid, and I think it really kind of holds up in this viewing. I watched it at the weekend with my youngest daughter, and she liked it too. Yeah.
We used to always watch it all the time as kids, and then I didn't watch it for a long time until a couple of years ago. My sisters and I watched it again, and we're like, wow, this really holds up.
It really does. I mean, the special effects are still fantastic. The kind of Harry, the Bigfoot suit is just perfect. I mean, it's at no point do you ever kind of think, oh, it's just a guy in a suit. It is Bigfoot, and it's what I kind of imagine when I think of Bigfoot is just Harry from Harry and the Hendersons.
The suit is done by Rick Baker, who I always somehow remember from Star Wars, but apparently he only worked on the first one, and I think he said this was his most proud accomplishment, was the suit from Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I remember being a kid and I was young enough that I didn't even question that it was a costume. Like, to me, it was just Harry, right?
They just hired a Bigfoot.
Yeah. And he was so expressive. I think that was the best part
Yeah.
of him.
But the expressions are really natural as well. I don't know how they did it, whether they kind of tied it into his natural facial expressions, or they had some really good kind of operators of the mechanics of his face. But it just, yeah, he's so expressive and so real. It just really kind of sells the whole story.
Yeah. I don't think that if they did it again as a costume, I don't think they would be able to do much better.
No, definitely not. And they might attempt to kind of CGI it or something, which would totally ruin it, because it's the kind of presence of Harry as a real person in a suit, but who absolutely looks like a realistic Sasquatch that sort of makes the whole thing work.
Yeah. And I really like the teeth. They're quite human-like, but large. And he doesn't have a big prominent canine like other apes do.
Yeah.
So, which they think that large canines in apes probably have to do with aggression and dominance and, social culture like that. So it was quite interesting that this really docile Bigfoot wouldn't have the large canines like humans don't either, because we don't generally rely on like male competition for mates like gorillas or chimpanzees do.
Yeah. It's really great the kind of the kind of way they present Harry as this kind of giant, gentle vegetarian who's just a kind of lovely, shy character. And the only time you see him eating anything that's not vegetable is he eats a goldfish, and he eats a filet fish from McDonald's or something, but that's it. And he's a pescatarian at best.
Yeah.
Mostly vegetarian. And so he eats her corsage right at the beginning, which is a great scene. The daughter's corsage, which is in the fridge, he eats. And as a European, I don't understand corsage culture. What is it? You sort of see it in American films all the time as this like really important. And she says it's really expensive, but it looks like a flower on a wristband.
It is. It's like a tiny little bouquet.
Do you guys know?
Yeah, I had one for grad. It's a tiny little bouquet you can either have it on your wrist or a pin to put it on your dress. It's quite old fashioned, and I highly doubt that there's very many people who do it nowadays, not in Canada as much. So I think we did in Canada in the same way that we kind of take on most things that are American by watching it on TV. But yeah, it was I think it was supposed to be so that your date is supposed to buy it for you. And it's supposed to be like, instead of a bouquet, instead of bringing you flowers for the prom, it's something that you can wear. So you have it with you the whole time. But
right, and you wouldn't have to awkwardly hold a bunch of flowers.
Yes.
Did your date buy your one for you, Kim?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, that's cleared that up then. That was something that's confused me for many years of watching films.
Yeah.
But back to kind of vegetarian Harry, I love the kind of whole the conflict between, and I think it's really, it's apart from the kind of classic Encino Man finding this kind of lost creature, taking him in, teaching him about the modern world, and then actually learning from him in the process. I love the kind of quite subtle for a film things that they brought in. So like him eating all the plants that he can find. He doesn't like the taxidermy that they've got all over the house. This big family of hunters.
Yeah,
they've got a lot of taxidermy, and Harry takes it out and buries it. So you've got evidence of burying behavior, burying of the dead in the kind of Sasquatch society.
Yeah, which is an indication of spirituality and thinking about lives.
Which is great just from that little scene. He doesn't pass the mirror test, which is interesting. There's a scene where he's exploring the house and he pulls the mirror off the wall and he's confused that there's not another Bigfoot behind it. So that's weird because like gorillas and other great apes apparently can pass the mirror test. They can recognize seeing themselves in the mirror, but Harry doesn't pass that test.
But do they pass the test at the first time that they're like introduced to anything human, or is it after a while? Like, is it after the glass? Like maybe it's not that big of a leap for them, whereas with Harry, maybe it was a bigger leap.
Possibly, yeah. I'm sure by the end of the film he'll be able to pass it. It's maybe just a novel experience that he has to work through.
Yeah.
I love that he makes a nest in the house.
Yeah.
When they get introduced to Dr. What's his face? Wrightwood, is it what he's called?
Right.
Wallace Wrightwood.
Wallace Wrightwood.
Yeah, the Bigfoot expert.
Yeah.
He makes a little nest, and it has the doctor sort of lie down beside him and gives him a few sticks and branches to cover him. He's just such a fully kind of realized character in all these kind of small things. It just shows that the film was made with a lot of love. It's not really something you see in kind of family films these days. You can tell that the producers and the directors gave a lot of thought to everything that kind of happens in the film and makes it fully realized, and it follows its own kind of immersive logic to a proper degree, which I thought was great.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to stick to our regular format and start with
In terms of what inaccuracies, it was hard to pinpoint because I think for a Bigfoot movie they did really well.
I agree.
Yeah, and then there's even the suggestion that he's not the only one, which I quite like, because a lot of Bigfoot movies, like with missing links and stuff, they're the only one, and there's a suggestion that Harry is just one of a community that wandered too far, right?
Absolutely, the ending's fantastic. Where spoiler alert for a 35-year-old film, but they return Harry to the Pacific Northwest wilderness where he came from, to a sort of untouched part. And you watch this really emotional scene where Harry kind of says goodbye. He speaks his first English words and disappears. And then, as he disappears, all of a sudden, all these other Bigfoots appear just by turning around. They're that well camouflaged.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really nice moment because it kind of makes you believe, oh, these things could be hiding right in front of us and not being seen.
Yeah.
Because they did such a good job of camouflaging them.
Yeah.
And it's just a really amazing kind of film moment.
Yeah. And then there's also times in the woods. I don't know if it was just me trying to make it, but so one of the Bigfoot evidence is that you hear them calling in the woods from a distance, and you could kind of hear that, like the calls of the Bigfoot. I quite appreciated that. I don't know if there was anything inaccurate that I can think of. I mean, even the costume was fantastic.
Yeah, there are lots of accuracies as well. I like the kind of portrayal of the Dr. Wrightwood, the kind of Bigfoot expert. They go to the North American Museum of Bigfoot, which is basically like a gas station.
It's the North American Museum of Anthropology.
Yeah, which is a gas station, and he's really kind of sympathetically portrayed. Unlike the hunter Lafleur, Dr. Wrightwood is a Bigfoot believer. He had his own encounter, a very brief encounter, and became a believer in his early days. And he runs this Museum of Bigfoot, the North American Anthropology Museum. And you see them he collects the plaster casts of Bigfoot. You see Lafleur making plaster casts of Harry after he's been chasing him at the beginning of the film. And it's all done, pretty accurately. That's how they take plaster casts. And Dr. Wrightwood, I don't know if you guys noticed, but all the way throughout, he wears a kind of bolo tie with a little Bigfoot kind of knot in it, which is really cute. So yeah, I thought that was a really kind of good sympathetic portrayal of what is essentially a kind of cryptozoologist who runs his own little museum.
When I was younger, I didn't know the inspiration for all these characters, but watching it now and reading IMDb a little, did you guys notice all the real life people that these characters are supposed to be based upon? Not really. I couldn't name names, but the kind of archetypes that they refer to are fairly common in that kind of community.
I always thought it was that guy that's always on those documentaries, right? The one with the museum that has the Bigfoot print in cement. And
which one is that?
Is that Lauren Coleman?
Maybe.
He's one of the Bigfoot experts.
Well, starting with the French-Canadian Bigfoot hunter, Jacques Lafleur, he's definitely loosely based on René de Hinden, who is a Swiss-Canadian Bigfoot hunter. He moved from Switzerland to Canada in the 1950s and very quickly became obsessed with Bigfoot. And I don't know that much about him, and there's not that much information that I could find about him online. And he certainly seems to be a totally different character than the one in the film, because the one in the film is the villain, obviously. But in real life, he seemed to be a really nice guy. People like to be around him, I think. He was actually, for a year in 1997, he was in commercials for Kokanee beer in Canada. Kokanee beer has a mountain on the label, and it's brewed in British Columbia. And I don't know if they still do, but they used to have a tiny silhouette of a Bigfoot far back on the mountain.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like the Bigfoot would be in different positions on different labels. So I always remember when I was like a teenager drinking beer, trying to find the Bigfoot.
Wow, that's cool.
They have a commercial with René de Hinden from 1997 talking about Bigfoot research, and it's very much making fun of himself, talking about how he's been searching forever and he can't find it, but like the Bigfoot is wandering around in the background behind him and he just can't find it.
Yeah. Which is what
Great.
Murray and the Hendersons made it look like it would be too, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's some really nice other kind of aspects as well of the kind of ecology. I could keep harking back to the idea of this modernity versus nature and violence versus peacefulness that the whole film's about. But I really like the bit where Harry's trying to get back to the mountains and he can't because there's this massive like 10-lane highway in the way, and he tries to cross over. I thought that was really neat.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a really good advert for wildlife crossings over interstates and things like that.
Yeah. I enjoyed, again, even as I enjoyed it as a child, and then even now it still makes me laugh, all the comedy in it. And it was a different type of comedy than the one with Susan, the missing link. So Susan, it was quite funny how he kept taking everything literally, right? Like it was kind of more adult-based humor, whereas in Harry and the Hendersons, it's more 80s humor, right? Like when George was trying to teach him how to sit and like just eating dinner and
yeah, it's just pure slapstick.
yeah.
It's not knowing in the way that kind of more modern films are. There's no kind of ironic level to it. It's just funny when things fall over.
Yes. That he's just doing things wrong, which is a bit Encino Man-ish too. I thought this movie, like watching it again, thinking about it for the podcast, I thought it's like Encino Man meets E.T. a bit and Old Yeller.
Yeah, that's a very good.
Yeah.
It's a very good description.
Yeah, because it reminded me of E.T. too, which I can't watch that often because it's so sad.
E.T. 2?
Also.
As well.
Is there a sequel?
No. He went home.
Going back to the characters again, the other Bigfoot researcher, Wallace Wrightwood, who runs the North American Anthropological Museum of Anthropology, he's less directly based on somebody, but like you said, I think he's loosely based on a combination of a few people. And according to IMDb, at least two of those people are John Green and Grover Krantz.
Right.
And so John Green was a Canadian journalist from British Columbia, and he at least partly got interested in Bigfoot research because of René de Hinden. So he grew up in BC and worked for a whole bunch of newspapers. Briefly, he worked for the Globe and Mail, which is one of Canada's biggest national newspapers. And he, as a journalist, would occasionally interview people from BC who had Bigfoot encounters, and he never took it seriously. And then one day René de Hinden came into his office as a journalist to ask him if he had interviewed people talking about Bigfoot in British Columbia. And at first he dismissed him. He's like, of course, that's not real. And then as he heard more and more reports, he started to believing in it himself. And he became one of the top Bigfoot researchers from the 70s and 80s. And he, because he's a journalist, had access to just reports like crazy. So he compiled a database, which is still available online. But after he died, he had his own website where he was hosting this database of Bigfoot sightings. After he died, it went down. So it's a little harder to find now. But I made sure to save that on my computer. So if anybody wants access to this database, send me an email.
Good work.
Yes.
But this database has like 3,500 Bigfoot sightings going from the 1800s up until the early 2000s when he died. And it has so much detailed data about like the measurements of footprints that were cast and locations and eyewitness testimony and like details about the creature, like the hair color and the shape of the nose and whether or not it had breasts or whether like all kinds of crazy information about it. And some people have used it. There was a guy named Fahrenbach who did one of the few actual statistical analyses of Bigfoot footprints, where he used the data from the footprint measurements to find out what the average footprint size was and if the distribution looked like a distribution of a natural population and stuff like this. So the average footprint size of a Bigfoot, according to this database, is about 16 inches long. And how wide was, I can't remember how wide it was, but like proportionally wide compared to human feet. So like, I mean, it's footprints. So I don't know if they're real footprints from a real animal, but like there's statistics about them, and we have that thanks to John Green.
Cool.
Then the other guy was Grover Krantz. I think we've talked about Grover Krantz and possibly John Green before, but Grover Krantz was an anthropologist who taught at University of Washington, I think, for his whole life. So he was a real anthropologist, but he became controversial because he became interested in Bigfoot, being based in Washington. And he was also longtime friends with John Green. And I think we talked about him before because he's the one who proposed that Bigfoot was a descendant of Gigantopithecus, and he tried to name the species Gigantopithecus canadensis. And the ICZN, the International Commission on Zoological Nomenclature, says you can't name a species without a type specimen, so they wouldn't let him do it.
Which is slightly bending the rules, because Sir Peter Scott gave Nessie a Linnaean binomial in the pages of Nature, no less. And so it was okay for him because he's a Sir, but not for Canadian upstarts.
Right.
Grover Krantz was also that guy that donated his body, his skeleton and his dog skeleton, right? And then they related them together. So it's like his skeleton, his dog skeleton, and the dog is jumping on him like in a happy man's best friend type way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that was him. That's cool.
I think so.
Yeah, that's at the Smithsonian, right?
I think so, yeah. So when my internet has been working, I finally got the webpage up. I think it was Pullman that I was talking about, that I thought they were basing it on, the Bigfoot expert. And I just picked up this web thing that he was talking about, and it said something like, he doesn't pay attention to ghosts or UFOs. He likes things that have evidence.
Well, I mean, that's it. All the way through the film, there's this the kind of the skeptical Bigfoot researcher who kind of changes his mind. He has a really great bit of dialogue, which kind of really resonated with me when I was watching it again. When he's having a discussion with George Henderson in the Anthropological Museum, sort of discussing how he believes in Bigfoot and how most people think it's nonsense. And he goes, yeah, but if they were real, people would have seen them all the time. And then he just says in reply, well, we see pigeons all the time. Have you ever seen a baby pigeon? And you're just like, whoa, what a great kind of rhetorical flourish that was. Who has seen a baby pigeon? No one, pretty much. But we see like adult pigeons all over the place.
But that's now isn't that a weird QAnon conspiracy now that pigeons are not real and they're actually like government drones?
Birds aren't real.
Yeah.
Birds aren't real. Yeah.
The birds aren't real thing is a prank. It's almost like a performance art. And the guy who started it almost never breaks character. He very recently did a video breaking character, reflecting back on it after years. But he has a van that says birds aren't real, and he drives it around. And I love that. But you're right, because he never broke character for years. I'm sure QAnon people take it seriously by now.
Well, I'm sure that's how the Flat Earth started.
For definite.
Earth Society. It had to have started that way.
Another thing that's partly drawn from real life inspiration is in the movie, once people start seeing Bigfoot running around the city, everybody starts going all vigilante trying to kill this Bigfoot. And so George and his father own this sporting goods store because they're avid hunters. And the store is suddenly really busy, where everybody, people in business suits, are trying to buy he's trying to buy a M16 or something. He wants to buy an assault rifle, and he's like, there's a waiting period on that. You can't buy an assault rifle. I can give you a handgun without a waiting period, but I can't give, or no, I can give you a long gun. I can give you a rifle, but I can't give you a handgun or an assault rifle. But this kind of really happened in 1969. In 1967, after the Patterson-Gimlin film came out, people were flocking to the Pacific Northwest trying to hunt Bigfoot. So at least in I think I don't know how to pronounce it, Skamania County, Washington, in 1969, they made it illegal to hunt Bigfoot in the county of, in Skamania County, Washington. And people online, you can read about this like it's a joke, like, haha, it's illegal to kill Bigfoot. But the reason was that people were flocking there with guns running around the forest, and they're like, somebody's going to get killed. So they had to make it illegal to hunt Bigfoot.
Oh, geez. What does that tell us about us as a species? I mean, it's not good, is it? Incredibly rare Sasquatch appears, and suddenly you've got people wanting to shoot it and turn it into a taxidermy.
That should be illegal. Like the whole idea that there's this rare creature that no one's seen before, and it should be illegal to kill it. That should be what's illegal, not that idiots are running around for.
For sure, yeah. But again, like Josh says, this is something which has a lot of historical precedent. I was reading just today, actually, about elephant seals. So there's two sort of species of elephant seal, the northern and the southern. And it had long been thought that the northern elephant seal population was fully extinct. And then in like the 1870s, the American Museum of Natural History found a colony of 8 northern elephant seals on some island. And so they shot 7 of them for the museum and took them back. And so there you go. And I think that the northern elephant seal is extinct now. Probably not helped in any way by shooting 7/8 of the surviving population.
Humans are the worst.
Yeah.
Well, the laws are different in different states. So there's a lot of rumors about it having been illegal to shoot a Bigfoot in British Columbia, but it seems like nobody can substantiate that. That's some anecdote going back to the 1800s where someone was trying to get a permit to hunt a wild man on their property and they couldn't get the proper permit or something.
That is so Canadian.
In California, they maintain a list of species, like of game species, and so anything that's not on the list isn't allowed to be hunted, which means that if Bigfoot does exist, it's not on the list of game species, so you're not allowed to hunt it. But then in Texas, you are allowed to shoot a Bigfoot because if it's not on the list of endangered species, then you can kill it in Texas, which means that if it exists, it hasn't been declared an endangered species, and therefore you can legally kill it. And there was a quote from somebody there about if it exists and it's not a human, you can legally kill it. So I think that if it's not a human is doing a lot of work, and I don't think that this question comes up enough when we talk about Bigfoot, but they address this in the movie as well, because they keep John Lithgow keeps saying, it's an animal, he's destroying our house, right? But the kid is like, it's not an animal, right? Mm-hmm. So biologically, where do we stand on this? Do you guys think Bigfoot would be human or non-human? Would it be classified as human under our taxonomic system?
Well, I guess it depends what lineage it belongs to. I mean, by appearances, and I think Rick Baker mentions this, that he bases it on a kind of Gigantopithecus, which would put it in the kind of Pongid lineage, which would be kind of with the orangutans. So there, it'd be quite difficult to say that it's a human if it's part of the orangutan lineage. But if it's some kind of Australopithecine or Homo erectus derivative that's somehow convergently evolved in North America and is kind of more closely related to Homo sapiens than it is to any of the other great apes, then yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, I think the only way that it would possibly make sense, and I'm not saying this happened because there's no way this happened, but the only way you could possibly have it make sense is if a population of Homo erectus made its way to North America and then evolved in their own lineage. And so then it would be like Homo Bigfootensis or something.
Homo canadensis.
Homo canadensis, yeah, because I think pre-Homo erectus was all in Africa. So Homo erectus was the first one to leave Africa. So it would have to be Homo erectus. And then after Homo erectus, you're starting to get, as far as we can tell, more like Neanderthal-ish. So then it's very clearly human.
Although I think, hasn't there been some discussion about, with Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, and I guess Homo luzonensis as well, the Philippine dwarf human, that they have some really kind of interesting skeletal features which suggest they may have Australopithecine ancestry rather than Homo erectus ancestry, and that they could be the kind of last remnants of an Australopithecine expansion from Africa, which hasn't left any evidence anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going around about those species that is debated. I don't think that one's really has as much weight as the Homo erectus one seems to just make more sense. But something that ties in that reminds me of is there's an anthropologist just put a book out about, he went to the island of Flores where Homo floresiensis was found and has been interviewing the locals who have a myth or a legend about small people, ape people living in Java, in the caves and stuff, and in the forest. I haven't read the book, but apparently it's about possibility that there's Homo floresiensis still alive, so similar, like a same vein as Bigfoot idea, and that nobody has found them yet because there's a lot of land that's humans haven't gone into and don't spend much time in. And then I think the other side of the book is supposed to be about the importance of just understanding the local culture and lore and society, and actually paying attention to the indigenous community there when we go to do even fossil hunting. How cool would that be if Homo floresiensis is alive? And that would be so crazy because everybody's so focused on the other part of the world looking for a giant human species that no one's seen, and we've just ignored the like tiny little one on a Indonesian island, Littlefoot. But there's already a fossil called Littlefoot, so we'd have to do something.
I did tweet out that there was an article in the media this week about that book, which had an interview with the author, and I've completely forgotten his name as well. So I'm just going through to see if I can find out.
I can't really remember the name of the book, but it's a good name.
I've got it. So it is Gregory Forth, I think. Between Ape and Human is what the book's called, by Gregory Forth. And so, I mean, this is something that's been talked about for ever since The Hobbit kind of was published, because I remember Henry G., who was the editor of Nature at the time, wrote about the kind of Flores folk tales of something called the Ebu Gogo, which is their kind of little people that lived on Flores, and which had a lot of similarities with what, other kind of stories of little people, whether it's the Sidhe in Scotland and Ireland, or leprechauns, or fairies, or whatever. Lots of cultures have a story of little people, but on Flores it kind of overlapped quite a bit with this discovery of Homo floresiensis, and especially since some of the stories said that they had been around until super recently. Yeah,
I think, wasn't it 17,000 years?
Wasn't it what?
When was Homo floresiensis around? It was quite recently, right?
In the original papers, they thought it was around until about 20,000, based on I think the dates they got from the cave site.
And they pushed that back,
name I've forgotten. Yeah, they pushed it back because I think that the dates they got were too young because of disturbance in the layers or something.
Mm-hmm. It would absolutely blow our minds, our collective minds, to not be the only human species on Earth if we were to find one. I mean, the last, 30,000 years, we have been the only ones, and that's unique, but it would be absolutely crazy. So cool. I hope I'm alive when they discover that.
It probably wouldn't be great news for the hobbits themselves.
No, it would be terrible if these movies have anything to say about it.
Or even history, if history has anything to say about what happens to. But this, I've just been looking at it in my bookcase. This is a really good book about the Hobbit. I don't know if you guys have read this one. A New Human by Mike Marwood. But it's a story of the discovery. So Mike Marwood was on the team that dug up the Hobbit, and so it gives a lot of kind of background and detail, and is really interesting. Ling Bois, that's the name of the cave site that the Hobbit was found at.
Yeah. So I mean, it might not be that Homo floresiensis or a descendant of Homo floresiensis is alive right now, but it could have been alive within the amount of time that human storytelling could have been passed on long enough, right? Because human storytelling does go on for a long time, especially if it's a good story.
Yeah, depending on the culture and how the stories are transmitted. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. And if it's really important to a community on an island like that, you could see how it would continue for a long time.
I think this is an interesting part of the Bigfoot or other cryptozoological ape mythologies there are, is the mythology part, because most of the people who are seriously interested in Bigfoot or other things like that are focused on the biology of it and whether, like, what's possible biologically and finding biological evidence. But anthropologically, I think it's really important to also look at that mythology and to determine, out of the whole mythos of Bigfoot or Yeti or all these different things, how much of that oral history should we take as factually true biologically, in what we should expect to find biologically if something exists. So, like, it's true that, like, every culture on Earth has some sort of wild person or, like, small person mythology. And in North America, when people are talking about Bigfoot, they talk about all these indigenous mythologies about wild people, and they take that all as evidence of Bigfoot. They say every indigenous culture in North America has some sort of hairy wild man mythology, and they say, therefore, it's Bigfoot. They say they saw a hairy man, therefore, that really was Bigfoot that they saw. And every culture has something like this, and in a lot of cultures, it makes a lot of sense. Like in Southeast Asia, you have orangutans and gibbons and things like this, which really are like hairy people. And so it makes sense that they have this rich mythology of mysterious hairy people. In Europe, it makes a lot less sense, but Europe still has these hairy wild man mythologies. Like you say, Ireland has leprechauns, and you've got fairies, and you've got like large hairy man mythologies throughout Central Europe, and in Russia, you've got the Almasty, and you've got. So even though we have no good reason to suspect that there really was an actual biological hairy man in European, where these ideas are coming from. So, like, to what extent should we expect that if a culture has a wild man mythology, it represents a real animal or just a thing that humans made up?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Most human cultures too, societies have mythology around zombie or vampires. So they're not always so distinct. Like in European cultures, the idea of the zombie versus the vampire is very distinct. But it's the idea of a dead person coming back to life, either physically or just spiritually, to cause damage to the living for either in revenge or just malice or whatever. And that seems to be pretty universal human fear through time and across geography. So I wonder too if maybe there's something to do with just an innate human either fear or longing. You know, like is there something in us that? So with the vampire zombie one, it's a little bit easier to explain because of disease and decomposition. You know, maybe causing disease or spreading disease or being foul air or something. So the idea that the dead are dangerous, right? And then guilt too. So if you did something to somebody and then they died, and then all of a sudden your crops failed or your sheep died or something, then it would be, you know, very human to think, okay, well, I was a really big jerk to Peter, and then Peter died, and now all my sheep are dead. So it was probably Peter, right? So there's something innately human in that fear that we seem to have. So I wonder if, and this could be because we haven't been alone for very long, if there is an innate human either longing, because it's not always fear, right? But longing or understanding that there could be other human species with us that is just in the back of our animal brain, like our lizard brain.
Going back to Josh's point about the kind of universality of wild men stories and how it's kind of weird that Europe has lots of these stories but doesn't have any wild primates. But what there is or has been until incredibly recently in Europe is bears. And bears, you know, in the woods, often standing on two legs, very easy to mistake for humans from a distance. I'm sure they have some kind of input into the whole kind of wild man story. And then also you have, you know, people that are pushed to the peripheries, people that are kind of outcasts and have to live in the woods because they're shunned by society. You know, that would be a very real fear for most of human history in kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could tap into that as well, the fear of being, you know, banished to the wild places and becoming wild essentially as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like insecurity over the distinction between human and animal and how quickly that can fall apart when you're outside of society. Around these parts here, we have the Wendigo, which is sometimes conflated with Bigfoot, but it's really more some sort of a half-human kind of cannibal monster. So we can see, that fear of like the blurred distinction between human and animal being manifest in some aspects of the Bigfoot mythology as well, or the wild man mythology.
Yeah, it's interesting. Wonder if there's a book on that. That would be interesting to read. If not, you should write it, Joss.
There's probably more Bigfoot books than actual scientific books we could be reading about actual human ancestors. There's no shortage of Bigfoot books.
I know, but it's more about the book that I would want to read would be why humans are hold on to that myth so strongly.
I'm a biological anthropologist and not a cultural anthropologist, so I like speculating about the cultural stuff, but it's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, me neither.
So where, as biologists, where do we stand on Bigfoot? Does it exist? Should we settle this once and for all on our podcast?
Yeah, I think we should. We owe it to the audience. I'm going to come out firmly as no, that it doesn't exist as a biological human relative, but the stories and the kind of cultural side of it is definitely important and has meaning and relevance. And I think we're essentially barking up the wrong tree and trying to find a biological source for these stories. They are not something that's represented by a biological reality, but they're something that's represented by a kind of mythological reality, a cultural reality, essentially. And it doesn't matter where you go; these places they kind of use the stories as a way to make peace with and find understanding with the kind of natural world that people find themselves in, whether that's the Pacific Northwest or the Tibetan Plateau or the Himalayas or Siberia, wherever. It's a way of, I think, finding connection with between the human and the natural.
Yeah, that's a good point. Unfortunately, I agree with Ross. I would really love to disagree, but I don't. I think we would have found it. I don't think there's. I mean, yes, there's giant areas in Canada and in North America in general that we haven't been to, but I think we would definitely have more evidence than what we do, and I don't think evolutionarily it makes sense at all. But I would love to be proven wrong. And even that much, I would love to prove myself wrong. I would love to find a Harry. Oh, I wanted to so badly. But then if you did, you'd have to keep him quiet because humans are horrible.
You could keep him with your house hippo.
Yes. Oh, it would be so cute.
I'm going to say I don't like the framing of the question of, is Bigfoot real or is it not real? Because I think Bigfoot is not one thing. It's 1,000 tiny little things. And so I think when people say they've seen Bigfoot, I think most of the people who aren't hoaxing really did see a real animal, except that most of the time it's probably a bear, like you say, Ross. So to say Bigfoot's not real is not quite right. There biologically is an animal that people are seeing, and it's almost always not a giant ape. It's probably most of the time a bear or some other thing. But I mean, people are seeing real biological things, so let's not discount that. In some cases, maybe they're seeing something that we don't know about, like that Brian Sykes paper we talked about in a previous episode suggested maybe based on DNA it was some unknown species of bear, which, of course, Ross, you disproved that with your paper, right? So it's just a regular bear. But, I mean, that's always a possibility. There's a possibility that there's a new species of bear that looks different from other bears.
For sure.
Which is still pretty cool, right? So as a matter of just saying it doesn't exist, I think we can say maybe there's something to it that we can look into. Maybe we'll find something cool. Maybe it's not a bipedal ape, but maybe there's something out there that people are seeing that we can find that's still a new thing worth looking into.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're totally right, Josh. I mean, it's any time that you have a question that you're interested in, you should pursue it because, even if you don't get the answer that you want, you might get other answers that are just as interesting. So yes, maybe you won't find a Homo erectus in Washington State, but you might find unknown populations of bears, or interesting aspects of ecosystems that haven't been looked at before. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
One thing that people interested in Bigfoot who are not scientists are often very frustrated that scientists don't take it seriously. And I like to think that I take it seriously, even though I don't think it actually exists. But I think we can address the question seriously and scientifically while being skeptical of it without being dismissive of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But for people who are interested in proving that Bigfoot exists scientifically, what would we need to see in order for science to conclusively prove that it exists? And what kind of evidence is credible and what kind of evidence is not credible?
I would say
It's a good question.
To have an individual seen by dozens of people.
Yes, we got that.
Well,
dozens of people
at the same time,
seen
like,
Bigfoot at once.
So the same with like a UFO.
It's happened.
At the same time,
people in Appalachia have ongoing sexual relationships with Bigfoot.
Oh my God, Appalachia! Come on.
Okay, never mind.
We need something more than just somebody saw something, because John Green has 4,000 reports of people that saw Bigfoot.
I guess
sometimes they shot it. Sometimes it threw a barrel at them. Sometimes it kidnapped them. It carried them a mile and then dropped them.
Sometimes it gave them crabs.
Well, because I don't want to say what it would really take, because what it would really take is the villain in all these movies. It would take capturing it, having it in a lab, doing DNA analyses. And that's not what you would want to happen, but that is what it would take, right?
Pretty much. I think that would, anything less than that, there are people that would be willing to fake that kind of evidence. The only thing that wouldn't be, I think, fakeable would be a kind of living Bigfoot that could be kept somewhere humanely and safely and studied. Anything less than that, even stuff like DNA, we've seen with the papers from Melba Ketchum and all the other stuff. They haven't been faked, but they've just been done so badly and so kind of misconstrued that the DNA in that case is not worth anything. Stuff like a skeleton, that would be a great, but there's a whole history of things like Piltdown Man and other kind of forgeries that could make that less than concrete in terms of evidence. So yeah, a whole population that could be kind of studied like the Gombe chimps or something like that, with trained anthropologists in there. That would be what it would take if we don't want to take them into captivity, find out where they are and find a way to study them. It's interesting, the idea that yes, people might be seeing real biological creatures and mistaking them for or absorbing them into the kind of mythos of Bigfoot because of their worldview, their kind of constructed idea of what they expect to see. And bringing it back to the film, I find it really nice at the beginning where they actually run over Harry at the start, and the wife, Mrs. Henderson, asks, "Could it be a gorilla?" And I thought that was neat because that's the kind of thing that somebody would say if they have no kind of understanding of biogeography and what you might expect to find in the Pacific Northwest. We're kind of in a sort of we've always got an overabundance of richness of things like nature documentaries and zoos and things like that, where you can see a gorilla in these sort of places. And if you didn't understand it, gorillas are native and are found and have evolved in a particular region, a particular ecosystem in Africa, then why shouldn't you find gorillas in the Pacific Northwest or in Indonesia or whatever, that kind of stuff?
Is another form of evidence that I would accept at least as very supportive evidence is if in those Appalachian orgies with Bigfoot, someone were to become impregnated, have an infant that then we could take DNA swabs of that would then have unknown hominoid genes in it. Plus it would prove that it was some kind related to us enough to be able to impregnate a human woman. That I would probably accept as supporting evidence.
I did not expect you to go that way, Kim, but yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, I feel like I have an uncomfortable amount of knowledge about this topic right now. This is going to depend on how closely related Bigfoot is to humans and where they branch off. Because if Bigfoot is on the orangutan lineage with Gigantopithecus, we're separated from them by at least 10 million years, and you probably can't conceive a hybrid between a human and the orangutan lineage. But there's the question of how close do you have to be to humans to be able to hybridize with a human? And there's a very small amount of research which is very sketchy and hard to find on whether humans can hybridize with chimpanzees and gorillas. And it's sketchy because it's not ethical to do that research. So you're looking to places like Soviet Russia or China, and we don't have actual studies, but we have like anecdotes about these studies. And I think there was at least one credible study that I remember reading about where they tried to cross human and gorilla sperm and eggs, probably human sperm with gorilla eggs, in vitro, and the eggs were fertilized but aborted very quickly. And of course, they weren't planning to bring them to term because that would be horribly unethical. But I think that we can safely say that humans probably can't hybridize with gorillas. With chimpanzees, it's a whole other question. In the Bigfoot lore, there's stories about from Russia about sort of ape-like people who are alleged to be half chimpanzee or something like this. And I've even heard in some African places, there's an oral sort of mythology, like a taboo around having sex with chimpanzees because, at least anecdotally, it could lead to hybrid offspring. So it depends on how closely related you think Bigfoot is to humans. If they branched off of the Homo genus, then you probably could hybridize humans and Bigfoot.
So I guess what it comes down to is that if that were to happen, we were to have the infant, that would be supporting evidence of the existence, but the lack of that infant and the impregnation of those women is an evidence that it doesn't exist.
Or you can go with the Melba Ketchum paper where they say human DNA is evidence of hybridization between humans and Bigfoot, but it's just all humans, because humans can have babies with humans. So if someone gets pregnant, like I got pregnant with Bigfoot's baby, and you're like, no, you just had sex with a human, and now you have a regular human baby. So I don't know if that would be evidence either way.
Well, it would have to be a different type of human DNA. Like if we can identify, like even in the fossil record, we have Denisovian DNA, and then based on modern human day, they've been able to identify that there's an unknown other human species that we have no fossil evidence for. So I think it would be like that. I think that it can't possibly be close enough that we would mistake it for modern human. It would branch off at some point. There would be enough difference that we would think this was strange.
Yeah. So going back to the idea of hybridizing with other great apes, one thing that kind of makes it unlikely that would be possible to have like a human chimp or a human gorilla or human orangutan hybrid is that humans have 46 chromosomes, whereas apes have 48, because one of the human chromosomes is a fusion event between two other chromosomes. So human meiotic cells, the kind of sperm and eggs, have 24, whereas the great ape ones have 23, whereas the human I'm confusing myself. Let me go and just I'm breaking down.
I get confused about the number of chromosomes as well all the time, so I'm happy that the geneticist is also still getting confused about it.
So yeah, humans have 46 because they've got one fusion event between what are two different chromosomes in the great apes. So there'd be each sperm from a gorilla, chimp, bonobo, or orangutan would have 24 chromosomes in it, whereas a human would have 23. And that kind of, the fact that those are different numbers means that during fertilization there would be massive problems that would just cause spontaneous abortion, like was found in that anecdotal story. But I was an author on a paper which came out a little while back, looking at this kind of very similar question about how do you predict reproductive compatibility amongst hybrids. And so this paper came out in 2020 in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. So it's Allen et al. 2020. A mitochondrial genetic divergence proxy predicts the reproductive compatibility of mammalian hybrids. So in this paper, what was done was looking at mitochondrial genomes, so the little bit of DNA that you get from the mother side of your family, which evolves in a fairly kind of stochastic, but in the same way that radioactive decay is stochastic, but can be predictable over long enough time periods. And so what was done was they looked at how different does two species mitochondrial DNA have to be before you start to see evidence that they can't produce successful hybrids. And we used like different species of cat as an example, and looked at various other systems. And I think the usefulness of this proxy was that it suggested, just based on mitochondrial DNA, that humans and Neanderthals should be kind of interfertile, which is backed up by the nuclear genome evidence. We do have evidence of interbreeding between humans and Neanderthals. But they also suggested that because we have mitochondrial DNA from another hominin, from the Cima de los Huesos, Homo ergaster, is it? Or Homo something else, which is a kind of slightly different from Neanderthal, but based on that mitochondrial DNA, we probably would have been able to interbreed with them as well.
Heidelbergensis.
So it's kind of a useful Heidelbergensis, yeah. So that's a useful proxy for that. And I think that paper is free to download if anyone wants to look at it.
Well, there's some people who think Heidelbergensis might have been Neanderthal ancestors or pre-Neanderthals. Sorry, Josh?
Homo heidelbergensis is such a huge mess, and my advisor Mariana is right at the front of this debate talking about Homo heidelbergensis. We had her on our episode on Clan of the Cave Bear.
Yeah.
But as far as taxonomy goes, Homo heidelbergensis is a mess. And she just, we talked about it in another episode where she put out a paper saying, get rid of Homo heidelbergensis, replace it with these different things because the taxonomy just doesn't work for Homo heidelbergensis anymore.
No, in my undergrad though, we taught that it was Neanderthal ancestor, but that was obviously a long time ago now.
Anyway, back to Bigfoot. I think the problem with scientifically studying Bigfoot is that what we would need to do to prove that Bigfoot exists is just, in most cases, just unethical. Most scientists don't think it's ethical to go out and kill an ape that is at least closely related to humans and possibly a different species of human. It's just not ethical to kill it. If it's an endangered species, drawing attention to it is not ethical because, as you say, humans are the worst. It's going to cause people to want to go and kill it on their own. We're going to destroy its environment. If we try and go through any of the remaining untouched environments trying to find it, we're just destroying the last, untouched ecosystems. It's just, what we would need to do to scientifically prove it exists is just terrible for it and for science. So there's a lot of things in human research where we just can't answer questions because the only ways to address those questions are just not ethical. Mm-hmm. You'd have to just do things to people that are just not ethical to do. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the time we just can't actually answer this question. We can say, as scientists, we can all sit here and say, I don't think Bigfoot exists because there's not enough evidence. But in terms of actually finding the evidence, we can just sit here and say, we just can't ethically answer this question as scientists, so we're just going to have to leave it and say, Bigfoot probably doesn't exist, maybe it does, and I'm just going to have to deal with that uncertainty until fortuitously a skeleton shows up where I didn't have to kill it and I can study it, That's the best I can do as a scientist, and I just have to live with it.
We've got to wait for roadkill, like happens to Harry at the beginning.
Yeah. And even then it becomes an ethical mess because, that's the best way that we're going to find Bigfoot is if he gets hit by a car. But then, of course, everybody in Seattle goes crazy trying to hunt Bigfoot. So, I guess Bigfoot dies. As soon as we find out if Bigfoot really does exist, then they go extinct, right?
Yeah.
So what are our final thoughts about Harry and the Hendersons?
Well, I still loved it. I put it way up there. I think it's a great film with a great message, great special effects, well acted. John Lithgow's brilliant. David Suchet, who people, including me, probably know better as Poirot, another dubiously accented European. He's really good in it too. It's quite sinister and believable. But it's just a great family film. There's a lot more swearing in it than I remembered as a kid, but it's still very family friendly and has a good message, which is that you don't have to shoot everything. It's possible to be a gentle giant.
I also really liked this movie, and I remember it very fondly from when I was a kid. But I think that our biases are just showing on this one, in the same way that I think our love of Encino Man is just our biases about cavemen in prehistory, because this movie only has 6 out of 10 on IMDb, and it's never rated very highly. So it could just be that we really love Bigfoot, and that's why we love this movie. But I mean, I agree with you. The acting seems great to me. The costume is excellent. We never really talked about that, but like the story about why the Patterson-Gimlin film can't be fake is because it's impossible. It was impossible to make such a great costume in 1967, but in 1987 they could do this flawless costume. If you saw this guy in the forest, you'd think it was a real Bigfoot. 1977 they had Chewbacca in Star Wars, which was not as good as this costume, but it still looked like a real creature. So
definitely. I also, given it, I watched it with my daughter, and she really liked it. She's quite she's a kind of what the next one after Gen Z is. So she's 9 years old. She really liked it. But I think what's interesting as well is it's a very kind of countercultural message it's trying to send. This is an American film, basically saying that this obsession with guns and violence and shooting things and first and asking questions later is not a healthy way to be. And I think for an American film to be pushing this in 1987 is actually quite brave. And that could be why people maybe react so strongly against it, because, that's still a large part of North American culture.
Yeah, I mean, when you pointed out as a main theme, I hadn't even clocked that as a main theme, because that's just so kind of normal. You go to someone's house and it's full of stuffed animals, not teddy bears, but dead animals that are stuffed.
I always think, whenever I see like a private house full of taxidermy mounts, I always imagine the scene in the second Ace Ventura film where he goes into the trophy room, and it has this hilarious like overreaction of him kind of screaming in agony at seeing all these kind of stuffed heads. I said, "Wow, this is a lovely house of death."
Yeah, that's what it feels like when you go in there.
Yeah.
Overall, I find 2 takeaways from this conversation. One is that if you are going for hikes or looking for Bigfoot and you find it, not tell anybody. Keep it quiet. Keep it to yourself. And the other one is if you are a Bigfoot, to not go to Texas. So to our Bigfoot listeners,
that's probably why they're only found in the Pacific Northwest now, because all the Texan Bigfoot have been shot.
Yeah.
And what was your review of the movie, Kim, on the Encino Man scale?
Oh, I think it's up there. I put it as 10. I love this movie. It's up there with like to watch it over and over again with Encino Man. I was so excited when you guys, I think Josh suggested last week.
Great.
Usually I watch it the day of, and I actually watched this 2 days ago because I just needed a break, and I was like, I want to watch it.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.